I'm Glen Michaelides. I'm the founder and CEO of the Titans Academy. I'm a business owner and I'm an entrepreneur and I'm someone with a goal.
Welcome to this episode of Someone with a Goal. It's your host Quinton here, and today you get to hear the incredible story of someone with passion, someone with purpose, and the CEO and founder of the Titans Academy, Glen Michaelides. And for those of you who don't know Glen yet, I want to assure you that this is the most roller coaster story we've had to date, because not only did Glen go from rags to riches, but he went toppling back down again and found himself losing almost everything, which he was able to turn around through a positive mindset and surrounding himself with the right people. Now to date, Glen's achieved accomplishments in business, marketing, sales, becoming a leader in all these spaces, as well as an international author, public speaker, and real estate investor. And in this interview, we hear how Glen grew up in a rough situation with not a lot of money and talks about the height of his career, how he got it, lost it, and then went on a quest, a mission to get it all back again. And he did. So I want to encourage you guys to pay attention, because what's especially interesting about Glen's story is his mindset and attitude to work hard, never give up, always be honest, and over-deliver. So with no further ado, sit back, relax, and enjoy the powerful interview about mindset, about surrounding yourself with the right people, and how to go from rags to riches, the incredible story of Glen Michaelides. Enjoy. Thanks for being on the show. In order to go into your story from where you started from, could you paint us a picture of where the entrepreneurship journey started and where you've ended up today?
For me, when I was very young, in fact, I can remember back at 5 years old, quite vividly when I was 5 years old, I knew I was different. It's almost like, the way to explain it is a little bit more self-aware. You know, there was something pushing me forward. I always had a drive and an ambition to do things. And very independent from an early age. I can remember turning up at kindergarten and saying to my mum, look, I've got this, you don't need to come in.
5 years old?
Well, I was probably younger than that. Wow. But I thought, in my mind, I had to grow up pretty quick. Now, my mum, after she had me, she was suffering with postnatal depression. And back in those days, they didn't really understand how to deal with a lot of that sort of stuff. And so here's a whole bunch of tablets, go home and best of luck. And my dad, being a hard-working man's out working overtime and doing the best he can to support a family, we grew up with not a lot of money. And so times were quite tough. My mum was struggled a lot. This undiagnosed postnatal depression turned into quite bad depression. And so she suffered along most of my childhood, in fact, all the way through her life. My dad had quite a bad motorcycle accident. He came off his bike and actually hurt his back. And so he was out of the game for quite some time. What that did is it forced me to grow up quite a lot quicker. There was things I had to do for myself. I think that's where potentially some of my independence come from. You know, there was an overwhelming feeling that I needed to help out, you know, support and provide more for Dad, and you know, my mum was going through a pretty struggling time. And I can remember at 8 years old, a lot of my mates all got a skateboard, and back then skateboarding was a new craze. And I went and said to my mum, "Hey, Mum, can I have a skateboard?" Well, my mates had got one, and I kind of felt like I was left out. And she said to me, "Look, don't be silly, where do you think we're going to get the money for that?" You know, I grew up quite, I'd say, medium to lower class, you know, when it comes to the money. I didn't know that we didn't have money. I just knew that there were certain things that I couldn't have and I wanted. And she gave me the best gifts of all. You know, I happen to believe that things happen for you, not to you. And what that did is she never said that I can't have a skateboard. She said that, where do you think I'm going to be able to come up with the money for that? That sparked an entrepreneurial ignition in me to go after things. I can remember being at the local lunch bar, and we're going way back here, but... how
old are you around this time?
Oh, you know, I was 8 to 10 years old, and with no skateboard, and thinking, how am I going to get a skateboard? How am I going to get the money for that? And I noticed that someone came up and brought some cool drink bottles and dropped them off on the deli counter, and the deli owner handed him some money. And I'm thinking, hang on a minute, what's going on here? I had no concept of this scenario, but when I asked the guy that was running the deli, look, what you gave that guy money for bottles? He said, yeah, all you got to do is bring bottles in and I'll pay you money. And I went, right, I know where there's bottles. So I went and scooped up all the bottles I could find at home, strapped a milk crate to the front of my bike, loaded up with bottles, and there I was, driving back and forwards to the actual deli. And you got 5 cents a bottle. I quickly worked out in my head, skateboard was $5 back in those days, not a lot of money, but I worked out how many bottles I needed. I exhausted all the supplies in my house and my neighbours, and then I started knocking on doors and asking, do you have any cool drink bottles? You know, didn't even think back then about, no dangers, of course, 8, 10 years old. As I mentioned, my mum was doing it tough. My dad was at work trying to, put enough money on the table to survive. So I'm out and about hustling. And
focused on the skateboard.
It was all about the skateboard. You know why? And for a lot of people out there, you know, the gift of not having sometimes can be the biggest gift of all. Kids can be quite nasty and mean at times, and you didn't have a skateboard, mate, you're on the outer. And so thinking back, you know, that drove me. Anyway, I started up quite a reasonable business. I got the skateboard. But what that taught me was some valuable lessons. The thing that my mum actually taught me was, if you want something, get off your backside and go and get it. You know, and she didn't say I couldn't have it. She just said, I can't afford it. To override that scarcity, there was a lot of scarcity, a lot of pessimism in my family. That's all we knew. And the second part to that is I had godparents that I'd only met a couple of times. And I've literally only seen them a handful of times in my life. But I can remember as a 10-year-old going to their house. Now, I don't know why my parents chose them as godparents, but I've got a fair idea they were very, very wealthy. When we went to their house, and I would have been 10 years old, it blew my mind because they lived on the river in this multi-storey home, of which I'd never even been in, a house that had 2 stories, and a full-size swimming pool out the back with a diving board. You know, in 1980, who has a diving board in the backyard and a sports car in the driveway? Now, once I seen that, I couldn't unsee that. And you know, it's taken a little bit of reflection to actually come back and think of these things, but I now knew what I didn't know, and I couldn't unsee it, and I wanted it. And I'd ask my parents, look, why is it that these guys have got this big house on the river, Mercedes-Benz in the driveway and the swimming pool, but in my mind I couldn't,
try to justify what the gap was.
Well, yeah, I was experiencing overwhelm as to how. And I'd ask my parents, and my dad say, well, you know, some people are just lucky, son. And so, I'm thinking, I don't know, really young kid. One thing I did connect though is, and this is something that was profound, is that the difference between them and us is they actually owned a business. Okay, so they had thriving businesses in the area. And I can remember even as a 10-year-old making that connection in my mind. I kept asking my parents, and to the point where I think I annoyed them, because it was like, don't ask again. You know, some people are just lucky, that's how these people live, we live over here.
Just let it be, we set our ways.
Well, I wasn't buying that. I couldn't accept that. And as I mentioned, from a young age, and we've talked about this off camera, and for a lot of people out there, especially if you are entrepreneurial, you have this inner knowing, okay? You're born with something, you know it's different, and there's a drive. I don't know what creates it, but it was in me. And as I mentioned, once I seen that, I couldn't stop. So for me, that memory stayed with me, and I started comparing what I had with what that was. And I spent years trying to work out, how do you get that? You know, apart from owning a business. Well, I'd say to my parents, well, how do you get a business? And they'd say, well, you know, that's just what they've got. So for years, I thought, well, you must be anointed as a business owner or someone that's rich. If you're not born that way, there's no way that you can be rich. I've since found out that's not true, of course, but for the longest time as a young child, that's what I thought. And that memory stayed with me, so I kept pushing on. I mentioned I was quite entrepreneurial, collecting the cool drink bottles. And look, I got jobs early in the piece. I realised that the only way to do it, as I said, my parents gave me a great gift, was to work. I've always been a worker. I was working in places when I was 10 and 11 years old, when you were supposed to be, I think the law was, say, 13 or something like that. And because I realised if I wanted to get money, I had to work. So interesting transition. I would say I was very street smart. Having grown up in a lower socio area, you had to be on the lookout. You had to be quite innovative. If you went into the wrong place, well, there's a good chance that a beating would get handed out. That really made me quite tough and strong. That whole upbringing, that whole adversity. And look, there's people watching this that have been through far, far worse than me. It was a tough environment, and it gave me internal fortitude and strength. School wasn't a strong suit for me. I could get good grades if I wanted to, but frankly, it bored the daylights out of me. I was sitting there thinking, when are we going to learn how to do what my godparents did in creating a business and creating wealth? I couldn't understand how learning what I was meant to be learning, and I'm not suggesting the school system's all bad. I'm sure there's people that have gone on and done really well, and we need people to go out and become academics and do different parts. For me, it was a whole different ballgame. And so basically, I was told, look, the best that you can hope for is to become a mechanic. Your grades aren't there, you're never going to go into university, and pretty well that's going to be your life. And for me, it was it was like a ice pick to the heart, basically, because I'm thinking, how on earth is this going to get me to where I want to go? And of course, I became a mechanic, and so for people watching this out there, if anyone's ever told you that you can't do something or that your life only amounts to this, and you have that driving ambition, I would say do not listen to them. For me at that time, that's all I knew. So thinking, well, hang on a minute, if the school curriculum organisers are saying that's the best you can be, well, I'll become a mechanic. So I became a mechanic, of course, left school, and I left, didn't finish my year 12, probably stayed on too long.
What pushed you towards that pathway, mechanic, as in
it was your hands,
or you?
Well, the techer told me that's the best you can do.
That's it.
I did love cars. Don't get me wrong. So I've always had that. Always had a real. I can remember sitting at home and the TV was on at like 5 o'clock on Sunday morning. I'm thinking, what's that? And I went out and my dad was watching TV, and I said, "What are you watching, Dad?" He goes, "It's Bathurst." And I said, "What's Bathurst, Dad?" He goes, "Oh, this is this race that's on." And that was me. I was hooked after that. I can't remember how old I was, but I was very, very young. And I was hooked on cars. So when they said, mechanic's the best you can hope for, I thought, well, I like cars. That's the best I can do. Well, I'm just going to go and do it. So my mum was a taskmaster. If you hung around the house and weren't working, you were in trouble pretty quickly for something. So you learnt. Her tough love forced me to get off my backside. So that instilled, and my parents very honest, a lot of integrity, a lot of values, very pessimistic about money, and it was a lot of scarcity about money. They didn't know any better. But what they taught me was very powerful values that stay true to me in this day and have kept me safe and have kept me successful. So of course I'm knocking on doors.
You're the eldest, yeah?
I'm the eldest, yeah, of two. I've got a younger brother, he's a year younger. I just went and rode my bike until I found somewhere I liked that I'd knock on the door and just walked in. This independence that I'm talking about allowed me to not overthink things. It was exciting for me. And I didn't know any different, but I wanted to go and speak to the owner. So I found this place that I like to look at, knocked on the door, and he said to me, "Don't go anywhere, stay right there." He was finishing off a conversation, had the conversation, and I told him what I wanted. I'm here for an apprenticeship. I told him exactly what I wanted, because my dad said, well, look, you're not leaving school unless you get the apprenticeship. You're not going to just work in a workshop. You have to get an apprenticeship. And he said, well, look, I don't have an apprenticeship, but I could put you on. I said, well, no, you don't understand. I'm actually here for an apprenticeship or nothing. And he said, wait right there for a bit longer. So he finished off his conversations. We sat down, had a talk. He agreed to put me on as an apprentice. And so I didn't know any different. Maybe I was being a bit cheeky, maybe I was being a bit forward, but in my mind, that was how I was going to be.
You weren't going to back off. Yeah.
So, be careful what you wish for, because I got that. And, of course, quite enjoyed it. There was parts of it that I certainly didn't. I didn't realise, liking cars and working underneath them on a hot day in a tin shed when it's 40-odd degrees, with your hands dirty all the time in grease, and back then safety wasn't a big thing, and I'd stand at the parts washer for hours on end washing in degreeser and stuff that you'd be in big trouble for now.
Uncomfortable with now, back then.
Yeah, but look, that built up a lot of strength and fortitude, and here's the interesting thing. I got to my 4th year, and I was an okay mechanic. I wouldn't say I was a gun. What I was excelling in is that people would come in, and I'd love the interaction with the clients. I found I had a real flair for communication, understanding. Part of my upbringing, I had to be very observant about things. My mum, suffering from depression, wasn't always in the happiest of moods. So I'd come home and think, well, who am I going to get today? And again, great gifts that she gave me is to become very observant of people, have an understanding and empathy. She taught me a lot of empathy about how things work. And so that I was able to map over. And so clients would come in and I'd get talking to them and I'd upsell them, and I enjoyed the thrill of, and actually I'd make more for the business in upselling and add-ons and different extras than I would twisting spanners. Interesting thing happened, 4th year, one rainy night, the boss comes up to me with a letter or an envelope, hands me this envelope, and then walks away. And it was I think it was June, one of those real miserable, and it was Friday, it was 5 o'clock, and he walks away. I'm thinking, what's this all about? I open up the letter. I regret to inform you, Glenn, that I'm going to be closing the business down, and we're moving down south to Albany, and I can no longer employ you anymore. And I'm thinking, what is going on here? All of a sudden now I'm without a job, and my heart sank, and immediately I'm thinking, well, what am I going to do? But here's the interesting part to that is what I didn't realise back then, all the gifts that I mentioned that I've been given by my parents about getting off your backside, going after what you wanted, my brain immediately switched to, okay, what's next?
How can I pivot from here?
Yeah, not knowing anything else other than becoming a mechanic, because of course that's what the teacher told me all I could be. I'm thinking, well, I need to get another job as a mechanic. But I also thought, you know what, I really loved interacting with clients. How could I get into sales? How could I get out of this grease? And not to say working on cars is a bad thing. I know people that have been doing it their whole life and love it. And if that's what you want, you go for it. For me, though, I knew it wasn't for me, okay? Loved the cars, but didn't love working on them so much. And I started getting a very strong vision in my mind about working in a clean environment inside an office. I'm thinking, how do these people get these jobs inside an office? I need to do that, and funny how the universe works. You put enough positive intention out there. I didn't even know what I was doing at that time. And I've been able to quantify this later in life, but very strong vision about me working inside of a clean store in sales, right? And I was obsessed with this for about a week. I was out of work for a week. I got a phone call a week later by a colleague who I was working with on the tools, who come and work with us for a little bit. And he said, hey, Glenn, what are you doing? I said, well, right at the moment, nothing. I've just been let go. He goes, how would you like to come and work in sales? In the four-wheel drive industry. One of the things about my upbringing I didn't say is, because we didn't have a lot of money, we never travelled too far. Our holidays consist of, one thing we did have though that was different to most, is we had a four-wheel drive. And back then, it wasn't the flash cars that you see now, it was an old Land Rover, and our holidays were spent at the beach, camping. Okay, so cost effective. And the interesting part about that is both my mum and dad were the happiest at that time. They were so happy. And so for me, my childhood memories were the best when we were away camping. My mum would relax, my dad was happy, they were both happy. We had freedom to go and explore and do what we wanted. I felt like we were, explorers. So, loved that. And when that opportunity came up, it was like, that's just crazy. That's for me. I'm there. So, of course, I turned up. Here's the interesting thing. Turns out I've got a flair for sales and interacting and actually building a lot of rapport with people and helping people out. You know, I mentioned part of the values that my mum instilled is help, seek to help out others. Don't worry so much about yourself. What can you do for someone else? Turns out that's a really good recipe when it comes to sales. You know, give value, give massive value. And so that's all I knew. So I hit the ground running there, and within a year, I'm running one of the branches. So by, you know, we've kind of moved along a bit, and I'm giving you a reasonable detail, but there's a lot of stuff in between. By the age of 21, I was running my first branch. Some of the people that were working under me were 40 and 50. So this took a bit of interesting adjusting, but here's the thing. I always knew that I was destined for that. Something in me was driving me. So I just found a way to do it. I didn't always know how to do things, but when you've got this desire, this will, this ambition, and I didn't even know I didn't know about setting goals back then. I didn't understand about the specificity of that. But what I did know is that I remembered what my godparents had and what I didn't. And somewhere deep in the back of my mind, that was kicking away at me. It was poking me in the ribs and driving me forward. That image in the back of my mind was tattooed into my brain. And that combined with wanting to provide great value, as I mentioned, I quickly rose to heights in that business. A couple of years later, I was built it up to a multi-million-dollar business, basically. A couple of years later, I was poached out of that business by someone who's seen what I'd done. Because when you're, and you know what this is like, and for a lot of people out there watching this, you've all seen people that are top performers. They stand out amongst the rest. You can go into the supermarket and you can look across at the people that are putting the items into the bag, and you'll see one of them, whether it's a girl or a guy, is filling up 3 bags to someone else's 1. They've just got this dog with a bone attitude. They're full on and they're just relentless. That's how they're built. That's what's in their DNA, and that was what was in my DNA. You get a reputation for that. And so anyway, I went and started a business up from scratch for this gentleman, and within a couple of years, built it to a multi-million-dollar business from nothing. So the good thing about all of that, there's good and bads to that. In my mind, I wanted to be a business owner myself. I'm trying to work out how do I own my own business? How do I do this myself? Again, I started with nothing, absolutely nothing. Everything I got, I've worked hard for. And, you know, on the job, being able to do this with other people's money, if that makes sense, what a gift, because it gave me some essential skills that I needed. At the same time, it was also very frustrating because I could see things about how the company was being run and I didn't like it. I had higher standards. There was certain things that morally weren't adding up. There was nothing totally immoral or legal going on, but I wanted the next level. I'm always looking for the next level. So I made a good employee in one sense, where everyone I worked for, I made literally a lot of money, but in a lot of ways, a bad employee because I'm a front runner. I'm always bucking the status quo. I was always pushing back. I was quite argumentative about what I believed in, what I thought was right. And most of it was all about providing value for clients. If I didn't believe the value was there, I'd push back against the owner because I just
wanted
this,
more. You knew there was more.
There was always more. You know, this driving ambition. I can't. You know, there's always more to want to hit the next level, to do better. And long story short, yeah, built a multi-million-dollar business, and then left there at its peak. And
on your own accord, just
on my own accord, I got to the point where I wasn't growing anymore with the existing owner. I wasn't getting to where I needed to go. So here I am again at the crossroads. I'm starting to think, you know what? I've done this twice. When am I going to do it for myself? and got a phone call. Funny how things happen, but I think when your intentions are so positive and so driven, and as I mentioned, tattooed in the back of my mind, I knew where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do. And there's a lot to be said for putting that out into the universe. I can't quite explain how it works, but when I've had that driving ambition, that thirst, that strong want, I wanted to own my own business. I wanted to be successful. I wanted to be wealthy. I wanted to run the business my way. I got a phone call from one of my suppliers actually and said, well, look, how would you like to come and and buy into my business? How would you like to come and buy into my business at a heavily discounted rate? And I went in there and had a meeting with him. And he said, look, what we'll do is I'll put you on and then give you an opportunity to buy in. After a couple of months, I thought, you know what? I'm not sure whether this is exactly the place that I want to work. I'm not too sure if we've got a values alignment, and so I don't know if I want to put my foot on the gas here in this direction. But turns out he came up to me, and I think he got a bit of a glimpse that I might be leaving. He said, "Look, I'll tell you what I'll do. You come here and you run this business for 5 years. It's worth, I think back then it was worth $20,000 or $30,000. It was valued. I want to build it up to $1 million, and then I'm going to sell it, and then I'll give you 30%." And I thought, ooh, well, here's an opportunity for me to actually buy my own business. That's yeah. And the thing is, the 5 years didn't even worry me because I was so set on my goals. I was so set on my mission. Long story short, I went ahead and applied the same skills, same tactics, same strategy, same mindset, same discipline to this business. And sure enough, 5 years later, it's worth $1 million. Wow. Here's an interesting thing. I ended up buying the business. So the owner sold out to me. I bought the business, of which I helped create. So the good thing about that is the work and effort that I put in, I helped create. I went about then building that business and taking it to the next level. I stamped my authority on it and my
this is your baby.
DNA, yeah, and built it up to 50 staff. And at our peak, we're over 10 mil per annum. It's quite a you class it as a medium-sized business. Boy, oh boy, did I learn some things along the way. In dealing with people, in dealing with scaling, in dealing with all the interesting things that come along with that. And we were talking about some of this off air. In order to be able to give advice, you've got to kind of been there and walked in the moccasins, and interesting format. Look, I can tell you, I made a lot of mistakes along the way. We've talked about some of those. In building a business of that size, it's. I had a few problems in the culture. Here's me thinking, well, I've got the strongest morals, the strongest values, but yet I had some problems in my own business. This is the interesting thing that can happen is that it become less about winning and more about surviving and saving. Here's an interesting thing that I've been running so hard, I finally got to what I thought was success. Now, in a business that size, I had enough cars to drive something different every day of the week. Multi-million-dollar homes, trips all around the world. Here's the interesting thing about all of that is that because I had my foot on the gas and I was running so hard, I didn't know what winning felt like. Because for me, there's always a next level. There's always something extra. And when I got to the point where I kind of paid everything off, I kind of dropped into a state of depression. And it felt like I was in a pit. This scarcity mentality, because it was about, now how do I conserve all of this now? Maintain what I've got. But the interesting thing is, it didn't feel like what I thought it was going to feel like. My model of success in my mind was I finally got the house. I got not one sports car, but I got 7 different cars, motorbikes, boats, you name it, and it didn't do it for me. It's quite interesting. Was it great to have all that stuff? Absolutely. But here's the interesting thing about that is that I didn't understand about planning for the next stage. What's next? Okay, and so when I got there, I become complacent. You know, it's an interesting thing. So inside the business, our culture wasn't the best that it could be. You know, we had some interesting divisions going on within the business. And when you get complacent, I actually, because, you know, here's the interesting thing. When you get into business, no one teaches you how to be a business owner. Back then, there was no school. It was just you work really hard, you put your foot on the gas, you provide massive value, and with a bit of luck and hard work and effort, you can rise to the heights that you need to. But I didn't understand about certain parts about building business, and although I built a very big business, there was parts inside there that weren't working as well as what it should. So I had some interesting times happen with the mining boom here in WA. My business was very diversified, so we had a lot of government departments, we had retail clients, we had civil works, we had contracts. When the mining boom came along and actually carried my business along with such ferocity and such force that I started to make some critical errors in the sense of, instead of having diversification, we kind of narrowed that down. And the mining clients were screaming louder. They were prepared to pay more money. And, you know, we could line up 30 or 40 cars all having the same thing, even up to 200 cars having the same thing. And for a lot of people, what they know here in WA is when that tap turned off, boy, oh boy, it turned off with such ferocity. And so a lot of people didn't withstand it. And still today, they're experiencing some of the effects, although things are turning around. Overnight, my business probably dropped off about 70% of the revenue. So, I mean, here's a wages bill of $160,000, and you know, our lease was near on $450,000 a year. We had such a massive premises because we needed it to house all of the vehicles. You really get to learn about what you're made of. And I mentioned making it to success and becoming complacent, and life has a habit of giving you a wake-up call. Well, I certainly got the wake-up call, and this complacency, this not really understanding about celebrating wins, will come home to roost. And you know, with the tap turning off, with a crew that were not, let's just say, not all cohesive and not gelling, I was facing some interesting times, some really interesting times, and it took absolutely everything I had to actually turn this company around. And I had to switch from a scarcity mentality into how do I help other people? You know, it was about, the interesting thing was about playing a long and short game at the same time. So for me in the company, I had to make some very, I suppose, prominent decisions. And that was, I had to get really clear about, what does this company stand for? What are we about? I had to reset and get clarity. And this is where I learned a lot about goal setting, and a lot about clarity, and a lot about getting very, very clear. I went and started to study. Okay, so I seeked out mentors. And I mentioned about not getting an education. One of the most important things that I can purvey for people is to go out and find someone that's already been through what you've been through, that's already done what you've done. So counterintuitively, my last dollars that I had, I spent on mentors. Why? Because I'm always looking for leverage. I'm always looking for a shortcut and to find a way to actually move forward at a rapid rate of knots. So I went and seeked out some of the best in the world and paid the price to find out what they knew that I didn't know. And I tell you what, it really reset the way that I thought about it. They gave me a swift kick up the backside, I can tell you that. And it was more about studying what some of the masters have done. So I went about rebuilding this business from the ground up, basically, in a long story short, and set a very strong mission for the business, a strong vision, strong cultures and values, okay? I went about sitting down with each one of the staff members and asking them, guys, what do you want? You know, how can I help you achieve what you want to achieve? and set about changing the culture to a win-win-win. It's got to be good for the client, it's got to be good for the business, okay, and it's got to be good for the team member. If not, it's a no deal. Long story short, we turned the business around, okay? And one thing I learned through all of that is the power is in the team, okay? The power is in helping other people get to where they want. Now, I knew that about clients, but as a top performer, as an entrepreneur, we can tend to cause a trail of destruction behind us if we're not careful, okay? And so not everyone can run at the same speed, but by sitting down and really defining out what my staff wanted, what my clients wanted, what I wanted for the business, we changed the whole culture into the business. The team rallied behind me, and it was a case of, took 2 years of solid work, but we fully rebuilt the business and got it back up on top again. So a lot of interesting lessons along the way.
What I find really inspiring, Glenn, is your mindset from when you were younger to coming through, especially right up to the mining boom. I just want to elaborate more on your mindset, because what was your mental dialogue like during that rough period? What were you going through in your mindset? Because that would have been testing.
Well, being up front, which is the only one I can be, I was scared shitless. And here's the thing, and here's the reason why. I come from nothing. I built up. Everyone looked on the outside. They'd look at me as the ultimate businessman, okay? But there was a storm brewing on the inside. The thought of losing everything and going back to where I came from frightened the daylights out of me. Absolutely frightened the daylights out of me. And what the perception out there was that this guy was a legend. He had all these cars. He's got this house. Some of my mates called me the $10 million man, and there was a bit of a joke going around because I had all these things and enough to do whatever I wanted. And the thought of losing that identity and going back to where I was, I was absolutely in a state of overwhelm. And I can remember saying to my wife, and taking a few steps back in building this business, we've talked about this off camera, balance with the family. Balance with the family. Did I get that right? No, not 100%. Was I there for them? Yes. Did they get everything that I never got? Yes, they did. But here's the interesting thing. When it got to the point where, look, we very well could have lost everything, I sat down with my wife and kids and I said, here's the reality of the situation. This is what could happen. And my wife and kids said that it wasn't about the money, Dad. We just wanted you. And I can assure you there was a lot of tears during that time. And they also said to me, if you don't go and do this, you'll never forgive yourself. So we back you, Dad. We back you, and I tell you what, that was like, there's a lot of tears. And for them, one of the most powerful things as an entrepreneur, men and women, is to have a partner and a family in behind the scenes. That's where all the power is. The power's always been a family. I wouldn't have been able to build a business to that size without my wife and kids supporting me. They're the number ones. And here's the thing, the interesting part about that is I said that I was building a lot of this for them to give them the life that I never had. It was more about me. If I'm honest and truthful, it was about moving out of the scarcity mindset into one of abundance. I really wanted to do that. And I did want to give them the life. It was tough growing up with no money. It hurt. But when they said it wasn't about the money, that was like an adrenaline rush like you wouldn't believe. Then it became about having a cause. I now owed it to them to actually make good on the time that I missed with them, the school events that I weren't at, because I wasn't at all of them, the coming home and probably being not the role model husband like everyone thought I might have been, in the sense of quite short, withdrawn, not wanting to have a conversation, not wanting to interact, business...
Not being present.
Not being present enough.
Yeah.
Business taking over everything, being the whole thing. When they said that to me, everything changed immediately. I put my foot on the gas, but I was much more measured about where I focused my power, okay, in creating balance. I started to really think about others rather than just myself. You know, what was driving me was scarcity. What was driving me was not wanting to lose. What was driving me was wanting to have all the nice things. When I finally got there and realised it wasn't about that, life's more than that. When I got hit across the side of the head by the universe with a lump of 4x2 and knocked clean back down, you know, starting from nothing, coming up to whatever I want. I can remember having my pocket being so full of cash, it felt uncomfortable. I didn't know what to do with it. To then not having enough, to then having to sell off. In fact, I sold off most of my stuff. One of the things I'm most proud of is that I never missed a payroll. Never missed a payment. Everyone was looked after. Everyone was treated with respect throughout that time. And that comes from my family and wanting to do the absolute best by them. And so that 2-year rebuilding of that business, I owe it to them. Now, I rebuilt that business in a way that it was turnkey machine. Okay, it was based on win-win-win. It was based on the real me, the real cultures and the real values and the real integrity that I'm about by creating intrapreneurs inside the business. So my salespeople, they shared in the profits. Every part of the team got to share in the profits in the business. It became about them more than me.
It's building them up.
It's a life on its own, because here's the interesting thing for a lot of entrepreneurs out there is they are like the lone wolf. They want to do it all on their own. And I was very much a lone wolf. Put your foot on the gas and look, if you can't ride with me, if you can't operate at my pace, I'm going to leave you behind. And now it's not about that. It's about how can I bring people along on the journey? How can I lift people up? How can I empower people? And, you know, by getting people what they want, you inadvertently get what you want. But it's in a whole different way now. Instead of forcing things, instead of grabbing it by the scruff of the neck, because that's how I do it, I try and control every situation in there, again, based on scarcity and fear. And for many years, I was quite successful at it. As I mentioned, the results of that weren't always favourable when it come to some of the fallout with family or having to let go of staff because they weren't up to the challenge. You know, if you can't meet that, well, see you later. Whereas it become more about empowering people, about choosing the right people, because there was people that chose not to come on this journey, on this rebuild journey. But empowering people to do a fantastic job and building in the team. It got to a point in my business where after I rebuilt it after 2 years, a lot of my competitors, as I say, they fell away and some of them didn't make it. I started to get people knock on the door and saying, Glenn, I don't know how you did that, but I need to know. So I had competitors, I had complete strangers, I had friends knock on the door and want me to help them with their business. After going through what I did, and I was more than happy to help. You know, to be able to create a system inside my business and map over what I call technology transfer from other successful companies into mine, to go and seek out mentors, to get the mindset and the intel, and you're asking about mindset and intel, I had to do some serious work on my mindset. 75% is in the mindset and the balance is in the mechanics. So many people have got the right strategy. It's not a lack of resources, it's a lack of resourcefulness. Okay, and so I had to really understand about my mind and how to actually focus all of my efforts on to getting what I want and focusing on other people. So, you know, I built a world-class company, people were knocking on the door, I started helping people, showing them how I did that. Because it got to the point where my crew said, well, look, Glenn, you don't need to come in anymore, we've got this. That was what I was trying to design. I was trying to design a system that worked without me. In the early days, I was the firefighter putting out all the fires. And at the end of it, I had a system that was had a life of its own. The business had a life of its own. People inside the business had a life of its own. So I started helping people, and I found I was helping people with their business more than I was actually running my own business. So I sold the business, and now I concentrate my efforts full-time in helping business owners through all of the interesting times that I've been through.
Just on your, you said how you worked on your mindset and your self-development. What were you doing?
Well, I mean, look, I went and seeked out some of the best. You know, I went and spent time with Tony Robbins. who's no doubt the grandfather. Anyone that's done any personal development knows Tony. Most of Tony's stuff is kind of perpetuated through the industry now, which is fantastic, and I'm sure he absolutely loves it because some of the principles that he teaches are just a mainstay. I went and spent time with him in Fiji in a very small group, and we worked on a lot of mindset. There was a lot of strategies and tactics, no doubt about it, about business, but the mindset was number one. Being able to step into that unknown and being comfortable with being uncomfortable. Okay, it was about building some very strong mindset muscles. What I call power promises. Making promises to yourself that you're not going to break. Anything to do with mindset, it starts with building a strong strategy in how you're going to play things out. You know, one of the things about being an entrepreneur is I call it the machine in the mind. Entrepreneurs have big machines, okay, which can create massive empires. You know, you look at some of the stuff entrepreneurs create, it can also go the other way. If you've got a big machine in your mind, you can create things that are unsavory in your life as well. It all comes down to the strategies that you play out. No one teaches us how to think, okay? We've got one of the most powerful computing machines in the known universe with no instruction manual. So for a lot of people, they're looking at and creating things that they don't want. You know, they teach race car drivers to, when they're going around the track, to actually look around the corner. You're travelling at such speed, if you're looking at the wall at the end of the straight, well, you're going to hit it. Be very careful about what you're looking at in your mind. We talk about setting goals, becoming very clear about our goals, set our intentions and what we want to do. Well, if you're looking at what's going to go wrong, if you're bringing back fears from failures in the past, if you're conjuring up a million different experiences from the future and living into that, well, your body doesn't know the difference between reality and imagination, and whatever you sow will grow, whether it be weeds or crops. Here's the interesting thing, and when people go through tough times, and I call it, they're in the pit, and I was in the pit when my business tanked, I can tell you that, and for a lot of business owners out there, they're in the pit right now, and they're doing it tough. Okay, one of the hardest things to do is to actually stop those habits because, you know, in the body, we go into survival mode. We're programmed that way to try and keep us safe. Our brains are actually lying to us. So in asking what are the things I did, well, I went and seeked out some of the best in the world. I went and figured out, Tony learned some powerful strategies from one of his mentors, Dr. Richard Bandler. So I went and trained with him, and he's the actual creator of neuro-linguistic programming. So I've become a master practitioner in that as well. The good thing about that, I use these skills for myself, for my business. I use these skills to help my people and empower my people. I use these skills to influence and help my clients. And now I use these skills to actually help business owners. Was it easy? No, it wasn't. You know, one of the hardest things to do is to change the way we think about it, but it all starts with one promise. And then we build on that. It's just like building a muscle. You know, we know we're going to go to the gym and work out, and we know we're going to have to go through some pain to build those muscles. But day after day, build after build, it gets better and better. It's the same with the mindset.
So what are some of your power promises? Just, I know you might have a couple, a lot, but what is like your top power promises that you keep to yourself, that you keep yourself accountable, that today I take action on what I need to do?
I've only sort of just put I suppose a name in around these. Unconsciously I was doing these power promises, okay. And when things weren't going right, I was breaking these power promises to myself. So I didn't realise that that's exactly what I was doing in the business starting to fall away. But they have a compounding effect. So if you keep breaking promises to yourself, well, that has a compounding effect in the wrong way. And what happens is unconsciously you're losing that integrity. Bit by bit you're eroding away your integrity to a point where a lot of people get to the part where they go, well, why bother? Why bother even trying anymore? And it's this erosion. So first up, you need to be conscious of the promises that you're breaking to yourself. And then secondly, to actually introduce some of the promises. So, you know, for instance, one of my promises is I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning every single day. You know, people say they don't have enough time, but there's 24 hours in a day. I was lucky enough to get a workout in with Arnold Schwarzenegger. It was completely by accident. But one of the things he taught me during this workout, because we had a very interesting conversation for 15 minutes, was sleep faster, Glenn. Sleep faster. And what he meant by that is you can still get good quality sleep, but actually set yourself up for success. There's things you can do so you sleep soundly for 6 hours. So for me, getting up early is really important. Now, the first thing I do is feed my body. The next promise is, if you can't look after yourself, if you don't look after you, number one, how can you have the energy to be the best for your team? How can you build a business? How can you build anything in your life if you're not looking after yourself? And the amount of business owners that I go to, they haven't eaten all day. No wonder why they haven't drunk. Your body, 70% of people are walking around dehydrated.
You're not performing at that.
Well, it reduces the cognitive function in your brain by probably 30%, even 2% dehydration. So these power promises, I wake up on time, I fuel my body. I'm in the gym. So I'm in the gym by 6 o'clock every single day. Some of the other promises is I don't miss meals. My wife's fantastic, as I mentioned. She's so good to have a supportive team. She helps me, and we put the meals together. But there's no guesswork. I don't ever get caught out. So there's some of the things. And then, other parts are to be true to yourself and make promises yourself to not sell yourself out, And the other part is I promise to make a plan. So every day I write my plan down. Because if you don't plan, well, then you become part of someone else's plan. And so many business owners, the other part is time. They go, well, I don't have time. It's because they don't have a plan. They're not clear on their goals. They haven't written down. They haven't got laser focused and absolutely clear with certainty. They're not already grateful for achieving it. When I think back to the things that I wanted to achieve in my life, they were there. I was grateful for them now. Okay, and so for a lot of business owners, they don't plan, so they become part of someone else's plan, and they get to the end of the day and go, but you don't understand, Glenn, I don't have time, I've got all this stuff going on. And it comes down to breaking promises. So it starts with one promise. I've worked with a lot of people in the weight loss industry and been lucky enough for them to take action and lose 40 and 50 kilos. But that starts with just one promise and then build on those promises.
How does an entrepreneur in today's economy, in today's entrepreneur, help? Or how could they build on their mindset and strengthen their mindset? Because a core focus of what I'm feeling from you is mindset, gratitude, visualization, and putting out there to manifestation as well. So
think about it like this: when you're married, yep, and so and for anyone watching this out there, they've potentially got a significant other, and when you met that person or first seen that person, they distracted you from absolutely anything that was going on in your life, for sure. And you become obsessed. Okay, you become obsessed with them in a very healthy way. I know I did with my wife, to the point where every part of the day I'd be interrupted with a thought of her, and I knew it was the girl that I wanted to marry the moment I seen her. And for a lot of people watching this, they know exactly what I'm talking about. And they were relentless in pursuing their partner, whether it be a guy or girl, to the point until they became husband and wife or significant other, because they were relentlessly obsessed. They never stopped. Everything was distracting them. So for entrepreneurs out there, or budding entrepreneurs that are looking to build, I think back to me in wanting to build. If it took 5 years, it took 5 years. For a lot of people out there, they're selling success mirages. This thought of, unless you're laying back on a hammock with your computer, the laptop lifestyle, and millions of dollars are coming into your bank account, you're not truly successful, and you're not doing it right unless that happens. It's the biggest load of BS that I've ever seen. In fact, it's perpetuated and pushed by people that have never built business. Some of the best mentors that I've studied in the world work harder now than they've ever worked before. And I'm talking 50s and 60s and even 70s. It's not the same type of work, okay? They're not in there doing the technical stuff, they're doing the things that they love. So in that mindset, become relentlessly obsessed, okay, with what you want to go after. And if you keep a unwavering visual image of that, feel grateful for what you want to achieve. And one of the interesting things that I learned during some tough times I was going through was to meditate. Extremely powerful, a lot of research done in the mind about how powerful that is. So one of my power promises in the morning is I meditate. I spend some time actually in gratitude for the things that I've already received now. Okay, so one of the most powerful things that I can suggest for budding entrepreneurs wanting to come up, figure out what it is that you want. Become relentlessly obsessed about it, okay? Every waking moment, that's what's going to get you through when things are tough, okay? In my mind, I knew what I wanted. I wasn't going to stop. I was never going to give up, okay? Surround yourself with a good quality team. That's important. It's not about being the lone wolf, okay? Enroll other people, whether it be your family. Make your intentions clear. So put them out there, write them down every single morning, spend time meditating, and actually involve your environment's probably one of the most powerful things when it comes to your mindset. Who you surround yourself with is who you become. And all the studies are there. Your net worth becomes the average of your 5 closest people. So part of the mindset is that you have to say no to certain things if they're not conducive. You know, Gandhi said, I don't let anyone wipe their dirty feet in my mind. Now, I think that saying is just fantastic. And so part of developing a strong mindset is your environment. Surround yourself with people that are happy, that are positive. You know, it's something that you do, Quentin, is that you go and seek out the best in the world. You go and seek out people that have achieved what you want to do. You know, and it's about surrounding yourself. Proximity is power. Okay, so in that mindset, make these promises to yourself. Get very clear about what you want. Write your goals down. Become relentlessly obsessed. Meditate and be grateful. Gratitude is one of the things that, although I understood gratitude and I was grateful, when you're running at 100 miles an hour and you're too focused on your goal and you forget the gratitude part, that's an important, powerful part. So bring that into your mindset. Here's the thing, your mind doesn't know the difference between reality and imagination. The more you imagine into your mind that you've already succeeded, that you're already where you want to go, and open your heart up. Feel grateful, you know, and if you want to practice doing that, it's about practice. Remember when your kids were born, and we talked about this, you know, when my kids were born, my heart opened up. I just about dropped to my knees with tears are rolling down my face. We've all experienced that. And I want you to think about mapping that gratitude over in your heart so you have the strong picture in your mind about what you want, open your heart to what you want, become relentlessly obsessed, never sell yourself out ever. Don't let anyone ruin your dreams. Don't let the naysayers come in and actually take that away from you. Don't let the people tell you the best you can become is a mechanic, okay? If you want it bad enough and you want to go after it, do not stop. Surround yourself with the best people. The environment's so important to mindset, okay? You want people that are going to encourage you. You want people that are going to support you.
Wow, that is powerful. Okay, Glenn, we're just going to go into a game. Now this game is called the Mindset of a Millionaire. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw you some words, and you can throw me back a word of the word that how that word responds to you or what that word means to you. So just a couple of words. So the first word, the only rule of the game is you can't repeat the word that you said to me. First word, passion.
Essential.
Gratitude.
A must.
Success.
Don't ever give up.
Challenges.
Necessary.
Business.
Everything.
Entrepreneurship.
The savior of the world.
And happiness.
Bliss and what life's all about.
And the last word, you ready? Fulfillment.
Peace.
Glenn, thank you so much for being on the show.
You're welcome, mate. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to hit like and smash that subscribe button so you don't miss any future episodes. And follow our Facebook page, Swag Headquarters, and be part of our community of go-getters. But as always, be blessed with success and see you on the next episode.